Welcome to another recap video. In the last episode, Rakiel showcased his potential as the Crown Prince by defeating his younger brother. In this episode, Rakiel faces new challenges that test his abilities even further. The stakes are higher, and every decision he makes could either cement his path to the throne or lead to his downfall. Stay tuned to witness the next phase of Rakiel's journey, filled with drama, action, and intrigue. So sit back, grab a drink, and enjoy the show. With a torch in hand and a smile on his face, Rakiel asked Damien if it was his first time seeing Manhwa. Damien replied that he was a warrior. Rakiel ignited the dried mugwort with the torch as Damien commented that such treatment didn't scare him. However, as the dried mugwort began to burn, Damien started to scream. Garden and the guard outside Damien's room heard the scream and were both shocked by what was happening inside. As Damien shivered in pain, Rakiel, with a creepy smile, remarked that he seemed rather weak. Rakiel reminded Damien of his boasts about being a warrior, questioning why he was crying now. Rakiel acknowledged that the process was going to be painful, but Damien had to endure it. The reason Damien can't leave the underground world is because of the mark. The curse of those who have the mark will be activated the moment their blood circulation becomes active. The moment Damien goes through a fierce fight in the Colosseum, he'll face extreme pain. In order to withstand that extreme pain, Damien bought painkillers with the money he borrowed from Kuzman. Rakiel elaborated that Damien would then engage in further fights to repay his debt, resulting in a vicious cycle of fighting and medicating. Rakiel directed his curse towards Kuzman for perpetuating this cycle. Damien's current situation involved using high heat to cauterize the mark first. With a smile, Rakiel pondered whether curing the novel's protagonist and strongest man would persuade him to join his side and get an extra life. An idea struck Rakiel that things would look even better if he also cured the other gladiators. Meanwhile, Damien endured considerable pain due to the burning Manhwa on his back but managed to control himself to bear the excessive pain. When the treatment was over, Rakiel informed Damien and instructed him to get up. After the treatment, Damien was still shivering with pain, his back burning and red from the cauterization. Despite this, the mark on his back had faded slightly, much to Rakiel's satisfaction. With pride and confidence, Rakiel asked Damien how he felt, expressing hope that he felt better and lighter. Damien paused for a moment before responding, expressing that he felt quite refreshed, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. Seeing Damien happy and refreshed, Rakiel felt proud and reassured him that he didn't need to be so formal. However, Rakiel informed Damien that he wasn't fully cured yet and needed further treatment. Damien questioned this, to which Rakiel affirmed and cautioned him not to touch any blisters that might appear on his back or overexert himself until his body stabilized, also advising him to avoid oily food. Confused by the notion of not overexerting himself, Damien asked for clarification, prompting Rakiel to angrily explain that he meant not to engage in fights. Despite Damien's concern that Kuzman wouldn't allow it, Rakiel assured him that he would take care of it. Touched by Rakiel's kindness, Damien asked who Rakiel was and requested his name. Rakiel, being proud, stated that he had just revealed his identity as the Crown Prince. There was silence in the room for a moment. Damien reassured Rakiel, thinking that he understood his reasons not to reveal his identity. Rakiel felt disappointed, as Damien didn't believe his claim to royalty. However, Rakiel instructed Damien that he must follow his commands without question from that moment on. He emphasized that regardless of what occurred in the Colosseum that night, Damien must remain in the room quietly. Damien, fully confused, questioned Rakiel about his instructions. Rakiel's frustration grew, and he angrily commanded Damien not to doubt him and to stay put for his own safety, emphasizing that it was the only way they could meet again. Damien, without further words, kneeled before Rakiel, expressing his understanding. Outside Damien's room, Garden called Rakiel from behind. When Rakiel responded, Garden asked him why he had been looking for Damien and treating him strangely, expressing concern about the safety and legality of the place. Rakiel assured Garden that he would understand later and instructed him to focus on the task at hand and ask for his help. Confused, Garden inquired how he could assist. Rakiel directed him to look for a large man with black hair tied in a ponytail and slit eyes. The scene then shifted to the Colosseum. In the bar, Garden searched for the described man and eventually spotted him. Excitedly, Garden approached Rakiel and informed him that he believed he had found the man. Rakiel accompanied Garden to confirm if the man matched the description. Upon seeing the man, Rakiel remarked that he closely matched the description and suggested they investigate further. Rakiel came in front of the man and dragged a chair from the table to sit down. Rakiel noticed the fierce gaze of the man sitting in front of him. Despite this, he addressed the man as Kuzman, attempting to ascertain his identity. The man denied any knowledge of such a person. Rakiel then mentioned Damien Kyan, asking if the man knew him and stating that he wanted to buy Damien. As Kuzman fell silent to listen, it became evident that he was indeed the person Rakiel sought. Rakiel then asked Kuzman how much he needed to pay for all the debts incurred due to the painkillers and breach of contract. Kuzman laughed and told Rakiel that 9 trillion megan was the amount required, stating that anything less would be impossible and that only the Crown Prince could afford such a sum. With a smile on his face, Rakiel informed Kuzman that he happened to be the Crown Prince. Kuzman didn't believe Rakiel and laughed loudly, sarcastically remarking that if Rakiel was the Crown Prince, then he himself was also one, introducing himself as the Crown Prince that sells medicine. Upon hearing this, Rakiel somewhat liked it and stood up calmly. Kuzman, disliking Rakiel's calmness, shouted at him, telling him that if he wasn't there to buy, he should leave. As Kuzman observed Rakiel leaving, he wondered if he had seen him there before. He signaled someone by snapping his fingers. When a person named Delik approached, Kuzman instructed him to find out the identity of the skinny individual who had attempted tricks, determining whether he was affiliated with the Colosseum or other promoters. Delik was authorized to employ torture and interrogation if necessary. Kuzman then chuckled and directed Delik to shear the individual into pieces and throw him into the river, as per usual. 1 hour later, as the door of the bar opened, Kuzman was shocked to see Delik entering, badly injured. Kuzman called out Delik's name as he fell to the ground in front of him. Upon seeing Delik's terrible condition, Kuzman inquired why he appeared that way. Then the bar door opened again, and Kuzman saw Rakiel entering the room with his knights. Rakiel removed his wig, revealing his true identity. As Rakiel produced his badge, the knights announced that the secret royal inspector was present. The secret royal inspector's badge gleamed as Rakiel displayed it to Kuzman. The scene shifted to an hour ago when Rakiel had left the restaurant with Garden. Garden kept glancing backward. Rakiel advised him to walk naturally, mentioning he was being too obvious. Garden laughed awkwardly, admitting he had never been shadowed before. Rakiel knew that when Kuzman felt even slightly threatened, he got his own people to shadow whoever he was wary of. Rakiel was aware that Delik was following him. That was why he had intentionally approached Kuzman. After sensing Delik's presence, Rakiel wondered how Kuzman was so predictable. Delik then took out his dagger and moved forward to attack Rakiel, but before he could reach him, he bumped into the knights. The leader of the knights regarded Delik with a glare full of fury. To Delik's astonishment, he observed several other knights aiming their swords at him, and the leader stated that his transgression was the attempted assassination of royalty. The scene shifted to the present, where Rakiel showed the badge to Kuzman and mentioned that the secret royal inspector had arrived. Garden inquired what Rakiel meant by the secret royal inspector. Rakiel dismissed it as nothing more than an idle remark, stating that he just wanted to try saying it once. Afterwards, Rakiel returned the badge to his knight, commending him for his excellent work. Kuzman, feeling tense, pondered the situation. Upon noticing the badge, Kuzman deduced that the knights were actually royal guards, but he couldn't fathom why they had arrived there. Rakiel then identified himself as the Crown Prince and commanded his guards to raise the place. He specifically pointed out Kuzman and instructed the knights not to let him escape. Kuzman was stunned to witness all of this. However, according to Rakiel's order, the knights proceeded to raise the Colosseum. Observing everything, Garden pondered Rakiel's actions, noting that things had indeed unfolded as Rakiel had predicted. His Highness had undergone a significant transformation, now extending his influence to subjugating underground organizations and concerning himself with the Empire's security. On the other side, witnessing the knights capture everyone in the Colosseum, Rakiel expressed satisfaction, praising their professionalism and cool demeanor. Rakiel was also excited, thinking to himself that he would get a large amount of bonus life. As Kuzman hid from the knights, Rakiel taunted him by repeatedly referring to him as the Crown Prince who sells medicine and asking where the Crown Prince who sells medicine was. Worried, Kuzman muttered to himself that it would be over for him if he got caught, so he ran away as fast as possible. While running from the knights, Kuzman wondered how Rakiel could possibly be the real Crown Prince and questioned why the Crown Prince would want to buy Damien. However, Kuzman resolved to stay hidden in the secret room until the situation calmed down and decided to wait. Unfortunately, the knights soon caught him. Kuzman found himself bewildered by how the knight had found him. Meanwhile, Rakiel, filled with excitement, exclaimed to Garden that he had been right about Kuzman's arrival. He then instructed Garden to hand over the 500 megan they had bet, leaving Garden crestfallen at losing his money. Kuzman wondered what was happening. However, Rakiel asked Kuzman if the situation was confusing for him, and despite Kuzman's efforts, he couldn't figure it out. Rakiel mentioned that he believed paying for medicine was very important. Kuzman was confused by what Rakiel was saying. Rakiel conveyed his sentiments to Kuzman about paying for medicine, expressing his dislike for those who don't pay for it. He also said he hates when people don't pay him back and dislikes doing it to others. Kuzman found Rakiel's words nonsensical. Rakiel reminded Kuzman of their previous conversation about Damien's painkiller fees, mentioning that he had asked Kuzman about how much he owed and how much needed to be paid. Kuzman remained quiet, his anger palpable as he shivered. Rakiel reminded him that the deal had been proposed in good faith, and Kuzman was the one who had chosen to reject it. After suddenly pulling out his daggers, Kuzman intended to attack Rakiel, claiming that his words were nonsense. However, before Kuzman could inflict any harm, he was punched by one of the knights, causing him to lose a tooth and drop his dagger. Rakiel laughed as the knight punched Kuzman, knocking him down. Kuzman bled from his mouth due to the punch. The knight warned Kuzman that it would be best for him to stay down. With anger evident in his eyes, Kuzman expressed frustration, remarking that things had come to a critical point. But Kuzman had a trick up his sleeve. When the knight punched him, he intentionally broke his tooth with his tongue. Then, he took the capsule and bit it. After biting it, the capsule was set to explode in 5 seconds. Kuzman planned to spit it at the knights, causing a poisonous explosion and creating a huge commotion. The paralysis would kick in the moment one was exposed to the poison. Although they might die if they were unlucky, Kuzman planned to survive by rolling onto the floor and escaping after spitting out the capsule. After that, he intended to cut off the head of the Crown Prince, considering it a perfect plan. Just as he went to spit, Rakiel squeezed Kuzman's face with his hand, causing the capsule to explode inside Kuzman's mouth. With an evil smile, Rakiel asked Kuzman what was wrong and if he was trying to spit something out. Rakiel already knew his plan and stopped him from executing it. Kuzman wondered how Rakiel knew about his secret weapon. Rakiel, with a smile, completed the count for the last second, and the capsule exploded in Kuzman's mouth. Kuzman fell to the ground, shivering, and mentioned that the paralysis had kicked in and he needed to pull himself together. He stated that he would lose consciousness in 3 minutes and could only survive if he consumed the antidote. Kuzman was about to take the antidote from his pocket, but before he could, Rakiel intercepted and retrieved it. Holding the antidote in his hand, Rakiel asked Kuzman if he was dying to know how he knew about it. Rakiel then opened the antidote bottle and told Kuzman that he wasn't going to tell him either. Kuzman raised his hand to take the medicine, but Rakiel consumed the antidote himself while gazing at Kuzman. Rakiel consumed the antidote. He gazed at Kuzman and revealed that it had all been part of his plan to get the antidote from him. The antidote was extremely bitter, but Rakiel endured it. Kuzman, realizing what had happened, tried desperately to retrieve the antidote from Rakiel. However, he was unable to extract it because the effects of the poison were spreading through Rakiel's body too quickly. Instead of giving the antidote back, Rakiel threw it away, refusing to return it to Kuzman, who had been the one to poison him in the first place. Rakiel was considering using Kuzman's desperate situation to demand medical treatment fees. A window panel appeared, showing that Rakiel had filled the first slot with 0.01 liters of antidote out of the 10 liters capacity. Meanwhile, Kuzman's condition was rapidly deteriorating, and he could no longer hold on. Eventually, Kuzman collapsed onto the ground, setting the stage for Rakiel. Rakiel knew the heart transporter point was located under the fifth thoracic vertebra, about 1.5 inches on both sides. He applied pressure with his thumbs to the heart transporter point on Kuzman's back, causing Kuzman to vomit. He discharged 0.1 L of antidote from the circle slot in his thumb into Kuzman's body. Kuzman felt a tremendous amount of pain and couldn't endure it, subsequently fainting. Then, several glowing panels appeared in front of Rakiel, displaying his achievements. They showed that his request for medical treatment fees had been approved at level 1 and that the skill had been activated. The glowing panels also displayed the patient's information: patient, Kuzman, treatment, detoxification, life expectancy increase, 21 years and 2 months. Another ethereal display opened, indicating that Rakiel had received 2.81 days of bonus life. When rounded off, this bonus life became 4 days, increasing his life expectancy by 118 days. Rakiel expressed satisfaction at the fulfillment of his expectations. The knights arrested Kuzman, following Rakiel's orders. Rakiel declared it was time to retrieve what he came for and return to the palace. Suddenly, he noticed Damien and some gladiators attacking the knights. The knights struggled against the formidable gladiators, puzzled by their unexpected strength. Rakiel stepped in, halting the fight, and told Damien that he had been instructed to stay still. Damien, shocked to realize Rakiel was indeed the crown prince, was rendered speechless. Still holding his sword, Damien listened as Rakiel asked if he now believed he was the crown prince. Grasping the reality of the situation, Damien lowered his sword, acknowledging Rakiel's authority. The scene shifted to a flashback of Damien's childhood, where his mother lay dying on the floor while he stood beside her. Reflecting on the moment, Damien remembered the heartbreaking image of a mother on her deathbed. He dreamt of that day again, the day he felt abandoned and utterly alone in the world. However, Garden woke Damien from his sleep. Damien sat up in bed as Garden extended his hand, introducing himself as Pierrot Garden, the main doctor for the prince. Damien shook hands with Garden, introducing himself as Damien Kian. Annoyed by their formalities, Rakiel instructed them to cease and follow him, as it was another busy day. On the way, Garden asked Rakiel what he planned to do next. Frustrated, Rakiel questioned if Garden was implying a lack of trust. Meanwhile, Damien looked on quietly. Rakiel had converted one of the palace halls into a Moxibustion clinic. In that hall, he kept Damien and other gladiators for Moxibustion treatment. Damien, observing the setup, asked Rakiel about the purpose of the place. Rakiel responded by saying it was a treatment room. One of the gladiators, Sergio, then asked Rakiel why he saved them from their hellish circumstances. He also let them stay in the smaller palace and gave them treatment. Sergio questioned Rakiel's kindness, seeking to understand his motives. Rakiel muttered to himself, unsurprised by Sergio's reaction. He wasn't acting out of pure kindness. Most of the gladiators were in their early 20s, the eldest only in their early 30s. If he released them from the curse of the mark, he'd gain a significant life bonus. However, he knew they would think he was insane if he revealed the truth. Rakiel explained to the gladiators that nothing in the world came without a cost. His actions were not solely motivated by kindness but also by his numerous illnesses. He disclosed that he was afflicted by various ailments. One of the gladiators proudly said that everyone in the empire knew of Rakiel's condition. This drew the attention of the others. Rakiel, maintaining a smile, silently vowed to ensure that the treatment for that particular gladiator would be especially painful. Rakiel further informed the gladiators that the current royal doctors were unable to cure him. Despite undergoing various treatments, his condition continued to deteriorate day by day. Therefore, he had decided to embark on a search for a cure on his own. He then asked Damien if he understood his perspective. Damien responded, thinking that Rakiel had brought them there to test out new treatment methods. Rakiel, pleased with the accuracy of Damien's guess, exclaimed that he was correct, surprising the gladiators. Rakiel asked Damien about his impressions of the treatment he had undergone. Damien responded that after the initial treatment, the nerve pain he had been experiencing had nearly vanished. Hearing Damien's positive experience, other gladiators began to wonder if Damien was testifying to the effectiveness of the treatment. Rakiel then asked if any of the gladiators felt uneasy about the treatment they were about to receive. Seeing no objections, Rakiel thought to himself that he had succeeded and could now proceed without any worries. Rakiel instructed the gladiators to start the treatment immediately, directing them to remove their shirts and lie on the bed. The treatment began. Smoke from moxibustion wafted from the palace windows. It was accompanied by the echoes of the gladiators' screams. 6 days later, the gladiators were still getting moxibustion. But, they weren't in good shape. Observing their state, Rakiel noted with concern that it was a mess, seeing them vomiting and sweating coldly. He said they had withdrawal symptoms from not taking the painkillers. This made it hard to continue with more moxibustion treatment. However, he noticed Damien sitting calmly on his bed, unlike the others. Rakiel called Damien by his name, and Damien responded. Rakiel asked if Damien felt dizzy, and Damien replied that he did. Rakiel then inquired if Damien felt like throwing up, and Damien admitted he was holding it in. Rakiel was shocked and wondered how this was possible. He thought to himself that perhaps this was why Damien was special. He also noted that he would have to resort to other treatment methods for the time being. After the treatment, Rakiel told the gladiators the session had ended for the day. He told them to rest and drink plenty of water. However, Rakiel asked Sergio to stay behind. He inquired if Sergio was experiencing difficulty due to withdrawal symptoms. Despite visibly trembling in pain, Sergio denied any discomfort and insisted he was fine. Rakiel was concerned for Sergio's well-being. He told Sergio to lie down and presented a needle. He indicated his intention to give Sergio a treatment. Rakiel admitted to himself that he was uncertain if acupuncture would work. But, Sergio had taken painkillers the longest among the gladiators. So, his withdrawal symptoms were the most severe. This made him the best person to test the treatment on. Rakiel suggested starting with the pressure point near Sergio's stomach. He said it's the first point. As soon as Rakiel inserted the needle into Sergio's pressure point, something triggered in Sergio's body. While Rakiel was preparing to insert the next needle, Sergio attacked him, choking him by tightly grasping his throat. Rakiel attempted to call for help, his voice strained under Sergio's grip. Sergio had been choking Rakiel tightly. His grip was relentless as Rakiel struggled to breathe. Panic surged through Rakiel. But, just as he feared he might faint, the grip suddenly loosened. Sergio collapsed, struck from behind by a powerful blow. Rakiel gasped for air, his lungs burning with relief. Damien stood behind Sergio, a worried look on his face as he reached out a hand to Rakiel. "Are you alright?" Damien asked, his voice full of concern. Rakiel took Damien's hand, grateful for the lifeline. "I'm fine," he reassured, though his voice was still shaky. As he stood up, Rakiel's thoughts turned to Sergio. He couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for the man. Sergio had passed out not just from the blow but likely from severe withdrawal symptoms. His body, hypersensitive to any form of stimulation, had reacted violently. Rakiel realized Sergio's nerves were so fragile. Even the smallest stimulus felt like a knife. Determined to find a solution, Rakiel decided he would need to use a thinner needle next time. He hoped this would cause less pain and help Sergio endure the process more comfortably. Rakiel sat quietly, reading a letter with a heavy heart. The letter was from the blacksmith, who respectfully addressed him as Your Highness. The message inside was disheartening. The blacksmith could forge a needle as thin as a thread. But, he couldn't promise to make many needles the same thickness. Unless I were a dwarf artisan, the blacksmith apologized, I can't guarantee perfection. Please forgive me. Frustration welled up within Rakiel, his patience fraying. He knew time was running out, and his withdrawal symptoms were growing more severe. Stress gnawed at him, leaving him in a state of unease. As he grappled with his next move, a sudden window appeared. It indicated that his organs had detected his stress. They advised him to resolve it quickly and warned that stress could lead to many illnesses. His heart took a moment to rest while his cheerful lungs and large intestine stayed by his side. Observing Rakiel's turmoil, his heart felt a duty to offer him guidance. The large intestine pressed against the heart's leg. It suggested giving Rakiel a hint before things got out of hand. Rakiel was confused by the bizarre interaction. He was startled. Another window appeared, showing a potential solution: he could summon monsters. The window detailed how Rakiel could use his health points. He could use them to unlock skills or summon monsters. This method had been mentioned in the novel he had read. Through the window, Rakiel discovered he had chosen to summon a monster named Gotcha. The explanation described Gotcha as a powerful entity. It has a strong personality and unwavering loyalty to its master. It also has a range of formidable abilities. Summoning Gotcha for the first time would cost 300 points. Rakiel had 500 health points. With a mixture of hope and desperation, Rakiel was given the option to perform the summon. He selected yes. With a silent prayer for luck, he initiated the summon. He hoped for a miracle to ease his burden. Rakiel stood before the new window. It showed the start of the summon Gotcha. The cost was 300 points, but Rakiel only had 200 health points left. Before proceeding, the Gotcha asked Rakiel to say the abilities he wanted in his summon. Rakiel exclaimed without hesitation. He said he wanted many thin needles. He sought a summon that could always provide them. Another window popped up, confirming that his request had been recorded. Then, 3 prize boxes appeared before him. The first prize was a happy summon that oinked. The second was labeled Iron Shit Discharge. The third was described as a cactus that shits and another cactus that shits. Rakiel found the names perplexing and wondered what could be wrong with them. The window indicated that the 3 candidates fulfilled 100%, 50%, and 0% of their request. It also warned that once a choice was made, there would be no chance to exchange, return, or refund. It urged careful thought. Rakiel noticed there was 1 jackpot, 1 decent draw, and 1 total dud. The options were a summon that brought joy and oinked. Another discharged iron feces. There was also a cactus that defecated. Confusion clouded his mind as he tried to decide. As he hesitated, the third box floated beside him. Rakiel's heart was filled with frustration. It seemed to implore him to choose the cactus that defecates. Succumbing to his instincts, Rakiel selected the cactus that defecates. A confirmation window appeared, acknowledging his choice. The box containing candidate 3 was being prepared to open. Rakiel prayed for it to be good. He knew he didn't have many health points left. After the prize box finally opened, Rakiel discovered a cute creature named Gosium inside. It stung him, and Rakiel realized it was a porcupine. Another window popped up with the Gosium user guide, stating that Gosium's size could be altered by feeding it the sunflower seeds that came along with it. Curious and a bit bewildered, Rakiel wondered where Gosium had come from. More windows appeared, explaining the seeds and Gosium's abilities. The red sunflower seed would make Gosseum huge for 12 hours. The blue sunflower seed would make Gosseum tiny. It had to be fed before the time limit for becoming huge expired. Gosseum had some intriguing skills. He had infinite thorns. New ones would grow back if plucked. At level 1, he had chestnut burr charge. It let him transform into a chestnut burr to attack. At level 1, he had a tricolored thorn explosion. It fired white, brown, and black thorns. Each caused varying degrees of pain. Rakiel, observing Gosseum's thorn-based attacks, asked if he could pluck one. Gosseum agreed, reassuring him that it wouldn't hurt. Rakiel then requested one white, one brown, and one blackthorn, which Gosseum provided. Rakiel first inserted the white thorn into his hand, feeling mild pain, which he found tolerable and noted would be manageable for the gladiators. When he tried the brown thorn, the pain was sharp and intense, causing him to wince. It was exceedingly painful, a stark contrast to the white thorn, and Rakiel realized the potency of Gosseum's abilities. Gosseum mentioned something. This prompted Rakiel to ask if the black one was on a Korean level and if Gosseum understood how painful it was. Rakiel felt a sense of foreboding about the black object and decided he would try it on someone else next time. He was relieved that the needle problem had been resolved. Rakiel was happy because Gosseum was his now, and he held it with his bare hand, causing his hand to bleed. In the Moxibustion room, Rakiel was heating the needle on a candle flame to disinfect it. Upon seeing Gosseum on Rakiel's shoulder, Garden asked Rakiel what it was. Rakiel told Garden to say hi and introduced him to Sir Gosseum. Curious, Garden asked Rakiel why he had Gosseum with him. Rakiel explained how he found Gosseum. He assured Garden that he could provide more details. Still, Garden couldn't shake off his worry. He wondered if Gosseum might be a summoned monster. 300 years ago, the genius builder Loyo Frontera had a hamster and a snake. He also had other creatures who helped him. On very rare occasions, there are summoned monsters. They appear in this world in front of the humans they've selected. The humans volunteer to work for them for the rest of their lives. They're truly rare and mysterious beings. Garden pondered how Rakiel had managed to acquire a summoned monster. He wondered if there might be something about Rakiel that he wasn't aware of. Feeling guilty, Sergio apologized to Rakiel. He confessed that he had committed a crime worthy of death the day before. With a smile, Rakiel reassured Sergio not to worry, explaining that such things often happen when one is in excruciating pain. Rakiel then told Sergio that he no longer felt anything, no matter how many needles were used on him. Sergio was confused, pointing out that Rakiel hadn't done anything yet. But Rakiel insisted he had, and to Sergio's surprise, he saw that Rakiel had already begun inserting needles into his leg without him feeling a thing. Rakiel continued to treat each gladiator with the needles. He was glad that none of them had much pain during the treatment. As expected, several windows appeared before Rakiel. They showed that his skill had been activated and asked for medical fees at level 1. The skill was active, listing Damien Kyan and 13 others as patients needing treatment for the curse of the mark. Rakiel received a life bonus of 80 days, though his expected life expectancy was now 171 days. Moreover, his skills had leveled up due to the substantial life bonus received. The skill is now called Requesting Medical Treatment Fees Level 2. It has a better ratio, 1950 to 1. The old ratio was 2000 to 1. Seeing that his life expectancy had increased and his skill had leveled up, Rakiel was jumping with happiness. Damien, witnessing Rakiel's immense joy, clenched his fist tightly, wondering why the Crown Prince was so jubilant and what had transpired to evoke such joy, especially concerning their recovery. After relieving the gladiators of their pain, Rakiel declared he was finished with them. The scene shifted to the Emperor, who was holding a cup of hot tea. A guard informed him that he would like to provide an update on the Crown Prince. 2 days prior, all 14 gladiators had been assigned as the crown prince's bodyguards. The emperor, puzzled by the term bodyguard, learned they were now called the Special Royal Guard and were to stay by the crown prince's side at all times. The emperor questioned what Rakiel was offering the gladiators. The guard explained that Rakiel's arrangement included a salary and various other benefits. The emperor wondered how Rakiel, once sickly and confined to bed, had now formed a private squad of gladiators. As Rakiel's actions grew more intriguing, the emperor's curiosity deepened. The guard reported that Rakiel had gathered all the servants and bodyguards of the side palace. He started poking them with needles, leaving the emperor utterly confused. Rakiel used the gossyum thorn as a needle to treat others. As Rakiel inserted the needle into one of his staff's faces, he asked if it hurt. The staff, despite making a painful sound, replied that it didn't. Rakiel questioned why the staff made a sound if it wasn't painful, reminding him that it was just a needle. After treating the staff, Rakiel called for the next patient. The patient was among the palace servants. He was ready to continue his careful and determined approach to healing. The scene shifted to a few days ago, when Rakiel was in the palace garden. Damien came to see Rakiel. Upon seeing him, Rakiel asked about his condition. Damien had undergone moxibustion for a few days. Damien responded that it still stung a little. Rakiel mentioned casually that it was a shame. Damien won't need moxibustion treatment anymore. Damien, puzzled, asked what he meant. Rakiel explained that the moxibustion treatment was complete and that Damien was cured. Damien, surprised, asked if it was true. Rakiel confirmed the treatment works. He said the experiments were done. After Damien fully recovered, he began to give thanks. But, Rakiel interrupted and urged him to listen first. Rakiel praised Damien's sword skills. He said he didn't want to waste such talent by sending him away. He extended his hand towards Damien, proposing that he become his bodyguard. Rakiel assured Damien that he didn't expect him to stay. It wasn't out of gratitude, friendship, or loyalty. He promised Damien handsome compensation, leave allowances, and a pension. Meanwhile, Rakiel thought to himself. He thought that Damien would soon become an advanced sword expert. He thought Damien would suffer the syndromes of a sword master. He was convinced that Damien, with his keen understanding of his own skills, was aware of this progression. Rakiel thought to himself about swordmaster syndrome. He saw it as a level where one's senses become very sensitive and uncontrollable. He realized that Damien would have worse insomnia. It would be worse than when he had the mark. Rakiel considered asking Damien to stay to treat him. But, Rakiel knew there was a high chance Damien would leave. The situation is as it is. Rakiel concluded that a fair deal was the solution. Rakiel told Damien they would draft a hiring contract. It will include paternity and childcare leave. Observing Damien's silence, Rakiel remarked that these benefits were expected. They included the freedom to leave work whenever wanted and even a mansion. However, some people were secretly watching them from inside the bushes. Despite Damien's silence, Rakiel attempted to persuade him by mentioning his extensive experience in negotiating contracts. As an enticing offer, Rakiel proposed a 4-day work week, hoping it would be difficult for Damien to refuse. Suddenly, the other gladiators Rakiel had treated emerged from the bushes behind Damien, expressing their desire to be hired as well. Rakiel, taken aback, asked them what was happening and how long they had been there. The gladiators explained that they believed Rakiel had cured them to hire them. They expressed their desire for payment. But, they quickly corrected themselves. They suggested repaying Rakiel for his help. They did this by assuring him they would protect him while Damien was absent. They reminded Rakiel that he had promised to help them improve. Rakiel understood their interest lay in money. He asked if they preferred it mainly for gain and benefits. The gladiators responded affirmatively. Observing their honesty, Rakiel thought to himself that they were being too honest. Yet, he acknowledged it was better for them to be truthful. He reflected. Those who stress loyalty hold many grudges. Considering the situation, Rakiel concluded that having a private military force just for him could be good. He noted that the royal bodyguards were not solely under his command. If he and the emperor gave conflicting orders, the emperors would come first. After careful thought, Rakiel told the gladiators that they were all hired as his special royal guards, to be known as the SRG. Following their hiring, the gladiators were happy and cheering. Damien remained silent but was also pleased about it. Rakiel, however, thought to himself that despite curing all of them, the bonus life he received wasn't much. Despite extending life expectancies by 100 years, he had only gained 18 bonus days. With his weak stamina and body, he couldn't go out and search for patients himself. He glanced at the palace with determination. Later, the scene shifted to Rakiel's study room, where he acknowledged the need to set up a clinic in the side palace. Damien and Garden were also present. Damien asked Rakiel what he meant. Rakiel then questioned if Damien knew what a clinic was. Damien replied that he did. But, before he could explain, Garden began shaking and burst into tears. He addressed Rakiel as, "Your Highness." Seeing Garden's sudden outburst, Rakiel asked what was wrong. He told Garden that he startled him. Garden, through tears, told Rakiel that he finally understood Rakiel's noble heart. He realized that Rakiel wanted to help the people by setting up a clinic. Garden understood Rakiel's feelings. This made Rakiel joyful. He rose from his seat and told Garden that he understood him. Garden responded with sparkling eyes. He noted his surprise. Rakiel still cared about the citizens' well-being despite his own illness. Garden and Rakiel sang together, emphasizing that all their efforts were for the citizens. Damien, however, chose to remain silent. Rakiel expressed his intention to prioritize treating the people within the side palace first. Garden asked about the palace's residents. This prompted Rakiel to propose building a clinic for their treatment. He questioned if they would feel comfortable seeking treatment in the prince's palace. Garden said it was still the crown prince's palace. Visitors might not feel entirely comfortable coming there. Rakiel responded. They said they needed advertising, such as sharing treatment success stories, to attract visitors. Rakiel emphasized that once word of mouth began to spread, more people would come to the clinic. It is called the Side Palace Traditional Medicine. With that plan in mind, Rakiel treated 500 patients. The scene then shifted to Rakiel after he had treated these patients. He was frustrated and wondered why everyone was so healthy. Feeling stressed, Rakiel muttered to himself. He had only gained 2 bonus days after examining 500 people. He deemed it unsatisfactory. He expressed the need for a patient who was very sick. Suddenly, Rakiel recalled something. Garden took out the information forms for the 500 people Rakiel had treated and placed them on the table. With a tired look, Garden told Rakiel the data on the families, genders, ages, and illnesses of the treated had been compiled as told. Rakiel examined the patients' forms, thinking that if the employees of the side palace were healthy, then he just needed to look into the health of their families. He considered himself a genius, confident that there was at least one person who was seriously ill among their family members. Rakiel began searching through the forms as planned, but despite his efforts, he couldn't find any useful information. Rakiel felt tense and wondered why he couldn't find any. He questioned where it could be and why all their family members were healthy as well. He noted there were only 10 pages left. Suddenly, Damien expressed his disappointment, shocking Rakiel and Garden. Rakiel asked Damien about his disappointment. Damien asked Rakiel if he saw patients as tools. Rakiel couldn't understand, so Damien explained that Rakiel had mentioned needing good testimonials, which was why he was trying to attract as many patients as possible. However, at present, he appeared to be seeking patients who were on the verge of death. Witnessing Damien's accusation, Garden grew angry and exclaimed that Damien was being impudent, asserting that His Highness surely had his own plans. Damien inquired of Garden if that was indeed the case. Observing Garden firmly siding with Rakiel and placing unwavering trust in him, Rakiel felt overwhelmed and expressed gratitude to Garden, mentioning that Damien's assertion wasn't entirely wrong. Feeling embarrassed, Garden apologized. Seeing Garden apologize, Damien asked Rakiel why he was being so harsh and how he could embarrass a loyal subordinate who was trying to stand up for him. Even after Damien took Garden's side, Garden became angry with him and told him that his words towards His Highness were too harsh. Rakiel became irritated by the arguments between Garden and Damien. Consequently, Rakiel asked both of them to leave the room. However, Rakiel was still concerned, as there were only 10 pages left. On one of the pages, there was a letter written to Rakiel. In the letter, someone mentioned, "I don't know if it's okay to write this in the questionnaire, but I'll gather my courage and write it. I have an 8-year-old brother. But, 1 to 2 times a month, his entire body would tremble all over and foam at the mouth as if he were possessed by a demon. I've gotten several doctors to look at him, but they weren't able to find out the reason. Clerics have also prayed fervently over him, but they said they already did their best by driving out the evil spirits within him." Rakiel was happy to finally find whom he had been looking for. After reading the letter, Rakiel was delighted to have finally found the person he had been seeking. One of the palace servants had written the letter, introducing her younger brother, George, to Rakiel. Rakiel approached George and greeted him. In response, George, addressing Rakiel as "Your Highness," said hello. Rakiel told George that he could just call him Rakiel, stressing that he was serious about it. Observing George, Rakiel thought to himself that this was likely George's first time at the palace, and meeting the crown prince must have been intimidating. He believed George was more scared than curious and realized he needed to calm the boy. To ease George's nerves, Rakiel took something out of his pocket, covering it with a cloth in his hand. He showed it to George, who looked puzzled. Then Rakiel removed the cloth, revealing toffee underneath. George was surprised to see it. Rakiel offered the toffee to George as a gift, but George hesitated to take it. Rakiel inquired of George what was troubling him, to which George replied that he couldn't allow Rakiel to touch him. Rakiel asked George if he could explain why. George then shared that he was cursed by an evil spirit, a belief that led other children to tease him and call him weird. Rakiel assured George that he wasn't weird. George shared with Rakiel that he had fought with the other children the day before because they had tried to imitate and tease him. However, George admitted that he had lost the fight. He then described a strange sensation he experienced when it suddenly became dark. Curious, Rakiel asked George what he meant by sudden dark. George explained that there were times when he would experience sudden sensations while he was conscious. He described how his body would shiver and tremble, feeling numb as if he were being lifted into the air and then dropped. The sky would appear strange, and he would hear unusual sounds. Then he would fall into a brief coma. Upon waking up, he would find it difficult to gather any strength at all. After hearing everything from George, Rakiel expressed his understanding. He acknowledged George's endurance through it all, appreciating the boy's strength in dealing with such a frightening condition. Rakiel consoled George by hugging him and assuring him that he had shown great bravery. Seeing such kindness from someone for the first time, George became emotional but told Rakiel not to touch him, believing that evil spirits had possessed him. Rakiel assured George that there were no evil spirits. Before he could explain further, a visual interface appeared in front of him, scanning George's pulse rate. Another interface displayed the result, indicating that the patient had a healthy body but was experiencing irregular brainwaves, suggesting symptoms of seizures that could lead to severe generalized tonic seizures. Rakiel thought to himself that George had a syndrome called epilepsy. Typically, epilepsy wouldn't cause any problems, but due to brain waves going rampant for unknown reasons, it could cause the whole body to convulse and the patient to lose consciousness. He reassured George, telling him that even if he were possessed by evil spirits, nothing about him was strange. Feeling excited, George asked Rakiel if it was true. Rakiel cheerfully reminded George that he was the crown prince and was always correct. While Rakiel felt fortunate to have learned about George's epilepsy, he realized that even if he tried to treat George, he couldn't find the cause right away. This realization frustrated Rakiel, especially since he lacked the necessary tools to perform scans, like an MRI machine. Suddenly, George drew Rakiel's attention by calling him. Rakiel noticed George behaving oddly and expressing that something felt strange. Realizing that George was having a seizure, Rakiel wondered why it was happening now. Garden and Damien were visibly worried, and George's sister began to cry. Garden, frightened, suggested that George might be possessed by an evil spirit, while Damien drew his sword and urged Rakiel to step away from George. Rakiel didn't like their behavior towards George. He stopped Damien and explained that the situation wasn't caused by an evil spirit but by an illness. George was simply sick and needed care and protection. Recognizing George's pain, Rakiel asked someone to fetch a pillow, and George's sister promptly did. George was lying on the floor with everyone gathered around him. Garden noticed that George was foaming at the mouth and asked if he should wipe it with a hand towel. However, Rakiel cautioned against it, explaining that George's chin muscles were contracting uncontrollably and there was a risk of him biting and swallowing the towel. Rakiel mentioned that they could only assist him once the seizures had ceased. Rakiel noticed something emanating from George and began to wonder why he felt mana coming from him. Realizing it was the Azrahan core technique, which was very sensitive to the flow of mana, Rakiel explained that if he could perceive it exactly, he might find the cause of the epilepsy. Rakiel placed his hand on George's chest and used his Azrahan core technique skill, allowing him to see inside George's body. He noticed that the flow of mana was chaotic, going wherever it wanted. Rakiel stressed the importance of focusing, as such chances didn't come often, and he needed to find the cause of the epilepsy. While exploring George's body, and navigating through the mana, Rakiel detected the nerves of the spinal cord and the cranial nerves. Rakiel started to sense fatigue due to utilizing his Azrahan core technique skill. Still, he said he couldn't be tired yet, he hadn't found any key information. Despite feeling unwell, Rakiel pushed himself, continuing to search for the cause of George's seizures. After some time, he finally identified something near George's brain. Rakiel explained that it was the vagus nerve and that it was causing the seizures. The wrong signals in the vagus nerve triggered seizures in George's brain and entire body. Rakiel then asked George's sister to bring a blanket and cover George with it. Everyone expressed concern for Rakiel, but he mentioned that George needed rest and should not be woken up, he should be allowed to sleep. Rakiel, exhausted, emphasized that they shouldn't make any loud noises or cause any ruckus. Before he could say anything more, Rakiel fainted. Everyone worried for Rakiel, asking if he was alright, but received no response. Even in his unconscious state, Rakiel felt relief now that he had found the cause and could treat George. Rakiel gained consciousness at night. He felt pain in his head and wondered if he had fainted and if the Azrahan core technique had been activated to its fullest while he was out. Suddenly, he was startled to hear Damien's voice beside him, asking if he was awake. Rakiel told Damien that he had scared him, thinking Damien was the Grim Reaper. Damien informed Rakiel that he had been asleep for half a day. Rakiel, unconscious for a long time, inquired first about George's condition. Damien informed him that George had woken up in the evening but was still very tired. Rakiel commented that it was normal, given the severity of George's seizure. Damien added that George had gone back to sleep immediately after having a good dinner. Despite feeling exhausted, Rakiel stood up from his bed. He pondered, realizing he hadn't expected to make such a precise diagnosis using the Azrahan core technique. He considered it superior to X-rays and MRIs. Now that he knew the vagus nerve was the cause, there was only one way to treat George. Rakiel mentioned that vagus nerve stimulation had been the treatment. As Rakiel was getting ready to leave, Damien inquired where he was headed in the middle of the night. As Rakiel put on his jacket, he expressed his excitement, saying that to get vagus nerve stimulation, one must be struck by lightning. The scene shifted to Xanata's palace, where two guards stood outside the door. Upon spotting someone approaching, they became alert and inquired about the visitor's identity. To their surprise, it turned out to be the Crown Prince, Rakiel, arriving unexpectedly. Rakiel thanked the guards for their vigilance. He asked to be escorted to Sir Xanata's room. Following the guards' guidance, Rakiel and Damien made their way to Xanata's room. Rakiel entered Xanata's room without knocking. This caught Xanatas off guard. He was about to go to sleep. Xanatas was surprised to see Rakiel at that hour. He asked why Rakiel had come. Rakiel apologized for the sudden intrusion and then requested a favor from Xanatis. Puzzled, Xanatis asked for clarification. Rakiel explained that he needed Xanatis to cast a lightning spell on his back. Xanatis was shocked by Rakiel's request. In a flashback of the previous day, the Emperor had told Xanatis his concerns about Rakiel. He had mentioned his worry about Rakiel's recent changes and strange behavior. Seeing the Emperor smile, Xanatis understood what the Emperor meant to convey. So Xanatis reflected to himself. Indeed, everyone became a fool about their children. He had served the king all his life. He knew the Emperor's innermost thoughts well. At present, Rakiel shook Xanatis and asked him to use his lightning magic to strike him. Xanatis thought to himself. Rakiel had changed a lot, becoming even more unpredictable. Xanatis questioned Rakiel's motives for potential harm. He warned that Rakiel's fate was tied to his survival. Rakiel told Xanatis he only wanted mild electric stimulation, not anything deadly. He requested that Xanatis maintain this stimulation consistently for 3 hours. Xanatis remarked to Rakiel in his thoughts that it was bizarre, addressing him as a little rascal. Xanatis explained that lightning magic was inherently very destructive. When cast by a high-rank mage, it could rival a natural disaster. He pondered if Rakiel wanted him to reduce it to static electricity. He would then keep a steady voltage for 3 hours. Such a task would need very precise control. Xanatis inquired of Rakiel whether he was aware that he was making an exceedingly difficult request. Rakiel assured Xanatis that he indeed was. Rakiel further conveyed to Xanatis that because of his precise mana control, he had come to him specifically. Then Rakiel held the metaphorical microphone. He gestured toward the audience and asked who else had such precise mana control. In response, the audience enthusiastically proclaimed, Sir Xanatis. Xanatis felt pride swell within him as Rakiel praised him. Rakiel once again asked the audience who the best mage in their empire was. The audience proclaimed in unison, Sir Xanatis. Damien and the guards were quietly watching Rakiel and Xanatis from a distance. However, Xanatis found himself warming up to the idea of accepting the challenge. He then inquired of Rakiel what would happen if. Before Xanatis could say more, Rakiel interrupted him. Rakiel said that if something happened to him, Xanatis wouldn't be held responsible. Rakiel assured Xanatis that even in the event of injury or death, he wouldn't be held accountable. Additionally, Rakiel informed Xanatis that the guards and Damien would serve as witnesses. The guards were as afraid as Xanatis, so they also didn't want to be a part of that, but they couldn't dare to express it. Rakiel told Xanatis that he wasn't doing anything bad. He was just trying to save someone. Xanatis told Rakiel that if that was the case, then he would give it a try and asked when they should do it. Rakiel said that they should start right away. Sitting on the ground, Rakiel pondered. He couldn't recklessly use electricity on a child. He needed to test it first to ensure its safety. Xanatis, standing behind Rakiel with his wand in hand, asked if Rakiel was ready for the process. Rakiel activated his Azrahan core technique and signaled Xanatis to begin. Consequently, Xanatis commenced releasing his lightning magic towards Rakiel. Due to Xanatis' heightened level of static electricity, Rakiel felt as if he were being stung. Rakiel thought to himself that it was impressive, as expected of the palace mage, and he knew Xanatis could do it. Rakiel decided it was his turn now. He planned to absorb the electric currents and convert them into electrodes. Then he would introduce electric signals. They matched the incorrect nerve signal in the child's vagus nerve. This would give him full control over those nerve signals. He would use the Azrahan core technique. He admitted it was quite an overpowered skill and hadn't expected to succeed in one try. After testing the process, Rakiel informed Xanatis that it was enough. Xanatis responded by asserting that he could do that all day. Rakiel then shouted at Xanatis to stop, emphasizing that it stung. The scene shifted outside the room, where Rakiel would treat George. Some servants and the gladiators also arrived. One of them mentioned that they wondered why he had gathered so many people again and what he was trying to do. Another person said they heard he wanted to gather people fond of spreading rumors. Then someone else remarked that they didn't understand what was going on in his mind. George's sister, present there, also wondered what Rakiel was going to do to treat her brother. Rakiel sat in front of George, ready to treat him while Xanatis and others were present in the room. Rakiel acknowledged to George that the process might hurt a bit, comparing it to a playful pinch. George expressed his worry about the pain, but Rakiel assured him it wouldn't hurt much. He inserted a needle into George's neck, and George barely noticed it. Rakiel instructed Xanatis to start the lightning process. Xanatis released his lightning. Rakiel absorbed it, pleased with how smoothly it gathered. Despite everyone's concern, Rakiel urged them to watch and share news about the treatment. Rakiel then transferred the electric current through the needle into George's neck, aiming for the affected nerve. However, Rakiel sensed something bad. He realized that the flow of mana was becoming erratic. This signaled an imminent seizure. He assessed that they had only a few minutes, possibly just one before the seizure began. Rakiel quickly decided to add the opposite signal to the electrode. But, they realized it would take 30 minutes, which they didn't have. He debated whether to stop and continue later. But, he worried about strange rumors and the uncertainty of getting another chance. Rakiel, knowing his health was fragile, decided to push forward. He requested Xanatis to triple the lightning power. It is now at 3 times its current level. Though confused, Xanatis complied, and Rakiel endured the increased pain. With only 10 seconds left until the seizure, Rakiel focused on taking in more mana. He wanted to finish the treatment. Rakiel identified the location to place the electrode, the carotid artery. Without wasting any time, he began wrapping the electrode around the carotid. As he worked, the countdown to the seizure continued. With 5 seconds left, Rakiel was still wrapping the electrode. George started foaming at the mouth. At 4 seconds, tension grew. Everyone in the room doubted if Rakiel would succeed. As the countdown reached 3 seconds, Rakiel found himself in a tense situation, the mana on the verge of exploding. He had only 2 seconds left. He was sweating a lot and struggling to wrap the electrode. Finally, with 1 second left, Rakiel gave it his all to finish. He hoped to stabilize George's condition in time. The seizure was about to start, but due to an electric power surge, Rakiel was knocked away. As the seizure loomed, Rakiel watched to see if his treatment had worked. George was on the verge of experiencing a seizure, but he realized it wasn't happening anymore as Rakiel had left the needle in his neck. Feeling relieved, Rakiel asked George if he felt okay. Xanatis stopped his lightning magic on Rakiel. George's sister expressed surprise since George typically loses consciousness when the pain starts. Rakiel felt relieved, though he noticed his body was numb. Suddenly, windows popped up in front of Rakiel. They said that a request for medical treatment fees, level 2, had been activated for George. He was undergoing a nerve stimulation operation. The final amount of life bonus received was 3 days, with a life expectancy of 161 days. Rakiel was happy to gain extra days. Another window mentioned that Rakiel had used the Azrahan core technique to the max. He had passed his limits and leveled it up to single circle level 2. This advancement greatly increased the mana of the mana circle by 130%. But, the next level's required stats included health points, 1,200. His current health points were 200. Rakiel was excited as the core technique leveled up, boosting the amplification. Then, Rakiel saw more windows indicating he had successfully endured powerful electrical stimulation. As a result, his lungs and large intestines had gained mental energy and resistance towards wood energy. It was noted that as mental resists wood, the organ possessing wood energy, the liver, had awakened. The scene shifted to the liver, who entered the room with an attitude, kicking the door open. Upon entering, the liver criticized the other body parts for being lazy. He threw his luggage towards them to take. The large intestine, lungs, and heart looked on as the liver tossed the bag on the ground. The heart mentioned that the liver was a newbie, while the large intestine expressed excitement at seeing him. He felt a surge of excitement. He was no longer the newcomer. The large intestine removed his t-shirt and eagerly approached the liver. However, the liver's reception was less enthusiastic. The liver gave the large intestine a hard slap and questioned if he liked to die so much that he was trying to make the liver the newbie. Rakiel observed this scene and was impressed as a window stated that his liver had granted him 300 health points. Following this, his lungs, heart, and large intestines contributed 500 health points in excitement. The window then announced the commencement of the liver's birthday party, granting him an additional 300 health points, bringing his total to 1,300 health points. Rakiel exclaimed that having a new internal organ meant he could acquire even more health points in the future, making it an awesome day for him. He mentioned advancing in the Azrahan core technique, awakening his liver, and gaining extra health points. At the end, the window displayed a message, and Rakiel pondered if there could be more. After that, George called out to Rakiel. Rakiel asked what George wanted. George replied that something strange was happening to him. Rakiel then took out the needle from George's neck and, with a smile, told him he wasn't strange. George explained that normally, when he felt weird, his vision darkened, and he lost control. Rakiel asked George if he was surprised because that didn't happen this time. George affirmed this. Excitedly, Rakiel informed George that he would stay like that for the rest of his life. Surprised, George asked if that was true. Rakiel assured George he wouldn't suffer the pain anymore and added that if he was lying, George could take over as crown prince the next day. Tears filled George's sister's eyes, and she called out to him. George glanced at his sister, then ran to her and gave her a tight hug. They were both super happy. Seeing them, Rakiel felt happy, knowing it was a total success. Rakiel noticed that the servants and gladiators were crying. They cried upon seeing George and his sister. Rakiel anticipated that now everyone had witnessed his good deed, the news would spread. He expected people to flock to the palace for treatment. Rakiel thought that by curing them all, he would earn a ton of extra life. With an evil laugh, Rakiel exclaimed that henceforth, he wished for a long and healthy life. But suddenly, Rakiel began experiencing blurry vision. As he fell to the ground, he noticed Garden's shocked expression while Damien rushed towards him. Rakiel wondered if he was fainting again. The scene shifted to Rakiel lying unconscious on his bed. He opened his eyes, feeling stiff, and wondered how long he had been out. Beside Rakiel's bed stood Xanatas, Damien, and Garden. Garden asked if he was awake. Seeing them, Rakiel asked why they were all just watching him sleep and if they didn't have other things to do. Garden replied that he was so tired of seeing him sleep. Then Garden burst into tears, saying he hoped Rakiel would wake up soon and even prayed hard for him. Rakiel was shocked and asked Garden why he was crying. Damien explained that Rakiel had been asleep for 2 whole days. Rakiel freaked out upon learning that he had been asleep for 2 days. Then Xanatas drew Rakiel's attention. Xanatas, filled with worry, asked Rakiel if he had been attempting to put him in harm's way. He expressed his concern about how he would explain to His Majesty the incident where Rakiel fainted from his lightning magic. Rakiel humbly apologized to Xanatas. Rakiel inquired about George's condition, to which George responded from behind Garden that he was perfectly fine. Subsequently, George approached Rakiel and chuckled. Surprised by George's presence, Rakiel questioned why he was there. George told Rakiel that he had pestered Garden to let him come there. After concealing something in his hand behind his back, George told Rakiel that he wanted to give him something when he woke up. He then presented Rakiel with a wooden necklace attached to a rope. As George handed over the necklace, Rakiel was surprised and asked if he had made it while he was asleep. Rakiel, holding the necklace in hand, thought that it might be a bit much for him. He had only saved George because he wanted to live longer and didn't expect George to feel moved by his actions. George called Rakiel. When Rakiel responded, George said with excitement that he wanted to become someone great too, and that he wanted to help others, just like Rakiel did. Rakiel was quiet after hearing George. He told George that the necklace was so well made and thanked him for it. He mentioned that the greatest reward he had received was seeing George healthy. Rakiel expressed that he needed to rest a bit more as he was still feeling tired. Afterward, everyone exited the room, requesting Rakiel to rest well. Before leaving, George waved his hand to Rakiel and mentioned that he would see him next time. Rakiel also waved back and assured George they would meet again. After everyone left, they closed the room door. Rakiel held the necklace in his hand, pondering its simplicity. He wondered who would wear something so plain without any jewels. With a sigh, he decided it was time to go to sleep. Eventually, Rakiel drifted off to sleep, wearing George's necklace. The scene begins with a palace servant arriving at his home with a special flyer in his bag. He informs his mother that he has returned. His mother, not expecting her son to come home, asks him why he is there today. The son explains that the Crown Prince granted him 5 days of special leave. The scene shifts to the dining table. The mother inquires if her son was indeed granted 5 days of leave by the Crown Prince. The son says yes. He adds that most in the side palace got special leave. The servant's father then asks about the Crown Prince's health. The son responds that the Crown Prince is much better compared to before. He also mentions that the Crown Prince has been behaving strangely. The father asks what he means by strange. The son explains that the Crown Prince wants to offer treatment to others, like a doctor. The son takes out the special flyer from his bag and asks his parents to look at it, placing it on the dining table. The servant's parents are confused by the flyer. Suddenly, a strong wind blows the flyer through the window. Many flyers are flying over the town. Some have been attached to walls, causing people to wonder about their purpose. The flyer is from Rakiel. It advertises a free treatment event at the opening ceremony. It mentions the treatments he will provide. It states that the Crown Prince, Rakiel Adria Magentano, will be there as the director. The palace's main doctor, Pierrot Garden, will be the specialist. Rakiel watches the townspeople from his palace window. He wonders if the rumors are spreading well. Garden enters the room and informs Rakiel that it is time to go out. Rakiel agrees, indicating they are ready to proceed. As they walk through the corridor, Garden remarks that Rakiel is up pretty early today. Rakiel responds. He says it is indeed the clinic's first day. Garden informed Rakiel that he had bought all the medicine ingredients Rakiel had asked for. Rakiel inquired whether he had indeed bought the licorice as well. Garden responded affirmatively, stating that he had taken special care in procuring them. Rakiel then praised Garden for his good work. He said he would need a large quantity of the items and told Garden to buy as many as possible. Garden understood. He asked Rakiel where he had learned all these methods. He sought the prince's pardon for the question. Garden said he was intrigued by Rakiel's methods. He, as a doctor, wanted to understand Rakiel's techniques. He admitted to having difficulty sleeping lately due to his intense curiosity about the unfamiliar medical techniques. Despite his best efforts, he was frustrated at being unable to comprehend how these techniques functioned. Rakiel realized that Garden was genuinely upset. He empathized with Garden. He understood that, as a doctor, it was frustrating to be unable to grasp the principles behind Rakiel's techniques. Rakiel acknowledged Garden's feelings, knowing the importance of understanding such methods in their profession. Rakiel confronted Garden, revealing that he came from another world. Garden, bewildered, responded with a confused, "Pardon?" Rakiel explained that in that other place, he wasn't a prince. He was a commoner named Li Han. There, he made a living through traditional medicine, which he had been using here. Garden expressed disappointment. He told Rakiel that he had brought up the matter after much thought. In response, Rakiel laughed and informed Garden that he had just told him the truth. Garden, not believing him, asked Rakiel to stop teasing and reveal the real truth. Garden then got serious. He told Rakiel that he wanted to be a better doctor and felt the same satisfaction Rakiel felt. Rakiel assured Garden that he was already on the right path. Garden apologized to Rakiel, who then redirected their focus to work. With a smile, Rakiel reflected that he had managed to progress because of Garden's support. Nonetheless, he had concerns about the clinic's opening day. He hoped for patients, not flies. He also worried that people might avoid the clinic due to its association with the Crown Prince, fearing he might develop PTSD as a result. Rakiel remarked that the first day should be the busiest. People gathered outside the door of the Side Palace Traditional Medicine Clinic. While attending to a patient, one of Rakiel's servants apologized for the interruption and asked for instructions. Rakiel replied, asking him to make a round of the place to see if any patients needed help and to ensure that the medicine was prepared correctly. Due to the treatments, Rakiel found several windows in front of him. They said he had enough experience from treating many patients. This experience had become the foundation for his pulse reading skill, which had now leveled up to pulse reading level 2. By sensing the pulse, Rakiel could estimate the person's health. They could access the results in the health check report. Also, when the patients awoke, Rakiel would gain access to more information about their organ symptoms. Rakiel was surprised to learn that the internal organs were participating in pulse reading. The scene shifted to the organs inside Rakiel's body, where all the organs were dressed differently except the liver. The heart informed the other organs that it was time for a blind date and instructed them to bring their weapons. The lungs expressed their excitement. The heart reminded them it was not interested in those over 4 years older or younger. The large intestine insisted that blind dates were needed. The liver advised everyone to stay calm. It said they were meeting old grandpas. The scene then shifted to the organs of the old patient's body, whom Rakiel was examining. The organs seemed to be enjoying themselves at a luxurious dining table. Afterward, several windows appeared in front of Rakiel. They showed that the consultation results for all organs of the old man had been received. It was reported that the heart showed no abnormalities, the lungs exhibited no irregularities, and the large intestines had a mild case of constipation with no other issues. However, the liver displayed signs of hepatitis, with advice given to quit drinking. Upon learning the information, Rakiel pondered. Had he been dealing with hepatitis or alcohol issues? He was concerned about his liver. Rakiel's liver explained that the old man's liver had processed alcohol for nearly 5 decades. This had left it in a state akin to weeping. It indicated that if this pattern persisted, the liver would inevitably succumb within the next 5 years. Rakiel was impressed. He saw the vital need for accurate diagnosis in treatment. He resolved to quickly awaken the other organs. After analyzing the patient, Rakiel informed him that his liver was quite damaged. When the patient asked for clarification, Rakiel explained. The tired look and yellowish skin showed liver fatigue. He prescribed the minor bupleurum decoction for 10 days. He also mentioned the chance of later recommending the cinnamon twig and poria pill based on a new diagnosis. Rakiel emphasized the necessity for the patient to cease alcohol consumption immediately. The patient became extremely distressed upon hearing about his condition. Rakiel told the patient that his liver was in very bad shape. He also doubted his survival beyond 5 years at this rate. Before the patient could speak, Rakiel ordered him to stop drinking. He did this not as a doctor but as the Crown Prince. He threatened to throw the patient into jail if he defied the orders. The patient, freaked out by Rakiel's command, agreed. Rakiel announced to everyone that it was time to wrap up for the day. He told all non-critical patients to return the next day. As Rakiel was removing his doctor's coat, one of the palace servants told him that he had done a great job. Another servant apologized for the earlier medicine mistake. Some others were uncertain about their performance. Rakiel reassured them not to worry, affirming that they all did great and encouraging them to continue working hard the next day. Suddenly, Garden entered the room with another person. The person was carrying a woman on his back. He told Rakiel that there was a patient who needed urgent help. The man, introducing himself as the eldest son of the Dinrir family, requested Rakiel to save his mother, whom he was supporting on his back. Rakiel observed the woman lying on the bed and asked her son how long she had been in that condition, noting her alarmingly high fever. The son replied that it had been since that afternoon. He explained that she had been fine before but started feeling cold around noon, and her condition had worsened to its current state. After checking the woman's pulse, Rakiel thought to himself that it was the illness that had decimated the 40,000 soldiers of Napoleon. Realizing this, Rakiel became extremely tense. After checking the woman's pulse, Rakiel thought to himself. The illness was the same one that had killed 40,000 of Napoleon's soldiers. Realizing this, he became very tense. He knew it was epidemic typhus fever, a deadly fever caused by Rickettsia bacteria. Rakiel asked his liver if it was certain about the old lady's condition. His liver confirmed that it had detected Rickettsia bacteria in the blood. The blood had entered the old lady's liver. Rakiel paused to consider and then questioned the son about the last time the patient had bathed. The son, confused by Rakiel's question, asked for clarification. Rakiel explained that he needed to know for a better understanding of her condition. The son mentioned that his mother had bathed the day before. Rakiel repeated the question to confirm if she bathed the previous day as well. The son affirmed that she bathed with warm water every day. Rakiel found it peculiar that someone who bathed daily was infected with epidemic typhus. He then inquired about her home, particularly her bedding. The son reassured him that she maintained tidiness and cleanliness. Rakiel pressed further, asking if there were any lice or fleas. The son confirmed there were none. Rakiel then asked if she had been anywhere recently. He asked if she had been where she might have encountered lice or fleas. After a moment of thought, the son explained that about half a month ago, her carriage broke down. It happened on her way back from visiting relatives. She had spent the night at a nearby farmer's place, where the farmer couple allowed her to sleep in their bed. After hearing everything from the son, Rakiel pondered. She realized that she started having a fever that day and had slept at the farmer's place about half a month ago. This was at the same time as the 15-day incubation period of epidemic typhus fever. Rakiel then informed the son that that's where she must have been infected. The son was shocked to hear about his mother being infected. Rakiel then explained to the son that her illness was epidemic typhus fever, which spreads through lice that cling to human skin and feeds on blood. Observing the woman's condition, Rakiel reflected on its seriousness. She was old and had a high fever. There was a risk of complications. These included pneumonia, harm to the central nervous system, and even tissue death in certain areas of the body. Realizing the situation, Rakiel instructed his female servants. They were now working as nurses for him. He told them to remove all of the woman's clothes. Then, they should clean her body thoroughly with towels soaked in warm water and help her into patient clothes. One of the nurses raised her hand and asked what they should do about the woman's clothes. Rakiel replied. He instructed them to burn the clothes, bed, and bedding she was using. He added that, after completing the task, they should bathe. They should also burn their clothes. He sternly warned that disobedience to any of his orders would result in immediate termination and punishment. His warning instilled fear in the nurses, who assured him they understood. Rakiel told the son to do the same. He also advised him to send someone to tell the woman's family about the situation. Then Rakiel shouted at everyone to leave immediately. They all rushed out of the room to carry out his instructions. The scene shifted to the palace kitchen. Rakiel prepared a soup. He thought that kudzu root tonic soup was the right medicine for fevers, which he found excellent. Rakiel explained that the kudzu root tonic soup was a fever painkiller made from ephedra and kudzu root. He took the medicine to the woman, assuring her that it would make her feel better and requesting that she drink it slowly. The nurses took good care of the woman. One cleaned her body with warm water. Another fed her the kudzu root tonic soup. Another helped her change her clothes. Despite all this care, the woman's health did not improve. In fact, she felt even worse. Rakiel observed her condition. Despite 3 days of care, nurses worked in 8-hour shifts. But, there was no improvement. Her condition seemed to worsen more due to the high fever. This showed that the kudzu root tonic soup wasn't enough at this stage. The balance of yin and yang was completely off, causing her yin energy to be severely depleted. Rakiel said he needed to restore the balance first. Then her body could benefit from the kudzu root tonic soup. It is a medical herb with strong yin energy. He expressed the need for something special. Rakiel then addressed his liver, lungs, heart, and large intestine. He criticized them for not working well in urgent situations. However, he soon remembered a particular place. With excitement, he instructed Garden to prepare a carriage for him. On the way to the Emperor's palace, Rakiel thought about the secret palace vault. Rare treasures and artifacts were stored there. He believed it was his best chance of finding a specific herb he needed, though access was complicated and only permitted to the Emperor. As the Crown Prince, Rakiel felt it necessary to utilize this privilege and decided to seek his father's help. Rakiel entered the Emperor's room. Damien waited outside. Captain Roberto stood behind the Emperor. Rakiel respectfully bowed before his father. Rakiel felt the Emperor was annoyed by the late visit. Rakiel acknowledged the pressure but explained his purpose, to request access to the secret palace vault that day. Curious, the Emperor asked why Rakiel needed such access. Rakiel exhaled. He detailed how he had set up a traditional medicine clinic. He treated many patients, including a severely ill noblewoman brought in 3 days ago. He explained that an ingredient crucial for her treatment might be found in the vault. The Emperor listened but doubted Rakiel's sincerity. He asked if Rakiel was exploiting the patient for personal gain by seeking vault access. He also questioned Rakiel's diagnosis, doubting its accuracy. He mentioned Rakiel's history of illness during his youth. He also noted Rakiel's limited education, casting doubt on his ability to practice medicine well. The Emperor was concerned. He doubted if Rakiel was caring for the patient enough. He also doubted if Rakiel's diagnosis could be trusted. Rakiel observed that the Emperor wanted to test him. The Emperor confirmed. He explained that the task was to diagnose Captain Roberto. Roberto is the royal knight, who had been slightly ill recently. He added that if the diagnosis succeeded, access to the secret palace vault would be granted. Rakiel proceeded to check Captain Roberto's pulse, focusing intently on the task at hand. Meanwhile, the Emperor privately doubted that anyone could accurately guess Captain Roberto's condition, as only he, Roberto's wife, and Roberto himself were aware of his illness. Despite this, Rakiel astounded everyone by discerning Roberto's baldness just from examining his pulse. Both Roberto and the Emperor were visibly shocked by Rakiel's revelation. The Emperor, initially annoyed, grew angry and demanded that Rakiel look at Roberto's supposedly full head of hair. Rakiel promptly removed Roberto's wig, revealing his bald head. Embarrassed and tearful, Roberto reflected on the strained relationship between the Emperor and his son. Upon seeing Roberto's true appearance, the Emperor was stunned, while Roberto remained on the ground, deeply upset. Meanwhile, Rakiel happily opened the door to the secret palace vault and gestured for Damien to proceed. As they walked through the corridor, Damien questioned if removing Roberto's wig was too harsh. Rakiel reassured him that it was necessary and explained they would focus on Roberto's treatment later. Their conversation paused as they arrived at the entrance to the secret palace vault.